Hey everyone, welcome to the 2024 FE7 plus FE8 draft race recap. I am Mecha, and I'm going to recap the race that we did last Saturday, give a bit of a summary, go over the strategies used and the chapters that went very wrong and the chapters that went very right for these racers. So basically, if you missed the event and you don't have time to watch the whole VOD, this will be a way for you to catch up and see how the race was. So I'm going to go over the racers and their individual qualities, what they did during the race, how they like to play. I'm going to go over the draft race picks that they did. It won't be a super deep explanation of like why everyone picked the things they did. There's like a separate video. I do want to make a meta video on FE7 draft racing specifically, but that is not this video. But I'll provide some explanations as to why you pick these units. And then I'll go over the best race moments, the crucial moments where like people take over one another, they screw up a little bit. It will be mostly my point of view because I was focused on me during the race, obviously, but I'll highlight some of the other pivotal chapters as well. So that is our menu for today. Let's get into it. So Castle, if you have seen draft racing in the past, you might have seen his name because he practically owns the Discord server community where the draft racing usually takes place, the organizing of it. And at this point, he's a very organized draft racer. I respect Castle a lot because he doesn't really go with pre-cooked strategies that much. He just kind of improvises his way through it and still puts down decent times. I do like to roast him every now and then, but I definitely think he has improved a lot as a player, and I thought he'd be a good opponent. Spam is one of my patrons, so first of all, thank you, and thank you to all my other patrons as well. Spam joined this race somewhat last minute because someone else dropped out, and he was nice enough to join in. He participated in a FE8 race previously with all these other two people, Castle and Pyrope, and he won an FE8 one. Spam is someone who uses pre-planned strategies and does it very well apparently because he did win, and he was the person I was most afraid of out of these three. Then there's me. I don't know who this is. Pyrope is relatively new, I guess, but during the race I asked him like, hey, how many races have you done? I apparently did like 3 already, so not as new as I thought. He is also an improviser, so he'll just bunga his way through chapters, and as you're gonna see, it works out for him. I didn't know a whole lot about him, but it became clear during preparation that he wasn't really doing like pre-planned strategies a whole lot. So I didn't think he would win, but let's just say he surprised me quite a lot. So, draft racing, picking units. It goes in snake order, so Castle picks first, it goes down the list and then goes back up. So Pirate will get 2 picks in the first round, and then it goes back up and Castle gets 2 picks. And in between, there's going to be picks from me and Spam. So, usually the first rounds you pick the carries, the units you want to do the most work with throughout the game, because it's faster to move one unit and have them decimate everything in their way than it is to piece together kills with a lot of different units. So you try to train one unit a lot, over level them, give them stat boosters, cap out their level, stuff like that. And it turns out that some of the best units for that are flyers and sometimes paladins and sometimes berserkers, because they tend to have the best combination of mobility and ability to move over terrain. Which one is better depends on which game, of course, but we'll go in detail soon. So Castle gets first pick, and if you're round 1 pick, well, you gotta pick like the one that makes the biggest difference for you, because you're not gonna get to pick again until like every other carry has been picked. So you're kind of stuck with whatever people leave for you in the second round. But you do get to pick the absolute best one in the game. And I think Castle made the correct pick here by taking Vanessa. The FE8 carries are a little bit far apart. I think Vanessa has by far the best potential for times, because Vanessa's first of all the only one who can skip chapter 10 Ephraim route, where you fly down to the boss Baran and just nuke him with the Axe Reaver. That chapter is the one where the boss starts as a Selena but then gets replaced by that Bow Knight, and it's a defend/kill boss chapter, and usually the best way to finish that fast is killing the boss. But Vanessa kills him by far the fastest, and this is one of the skips Vanessa can do. Generally, flyers are very favored over FE8. The other carries in FE8 are Cormag, Seth, and Franz, and they all have severe disadvantages compared to Vanessa. Cormag is of course not available for most of the game, and Franz and Seth cannot fly, and so heavy maps with heavy terrain really favor Vanessa. So I thought this was a good pick. Castle did decide to go Erica route. Erica route is usually slower when played optimally than Ephraim route, but if you play suboptimally or even poorly, then Ephraim route punishes you more, and so your potential time goes way up. So it is a way safer pick if you're not completely comfortable with what you're doing. And when Castle's improvising, it does make sense to go Erica route. So I like that. And Erica route still provides a lot of value for Vanessa. Even the equivalent chapter in Erica routes is can be skipped by using flyers properly. This is the chapter where you recruit Garrick and you fight Pablo for the first time. Flying up to that mountain with Vanessa and just seizing in a couple turns is very fast. So a good pick for sure. Now, I thought the second pick would probably pick Cormag, because I still think, even though Cormag joins a lot later than Vanessa, having a flyer in FE8 is still such a big difference maker, whereas the FE7 carries, which are Hawkeye, Dart, Florina, and Heath, they feel a bit closer. Like, usually the times to finish FE7 very fast are like around 1 hour 50 for like the really fast times, usually more like 2 hours, and in a race where everything goes wrong every once in a while, it'll be more like 2 hours and 30 minutes or something like that. And I thought most carries could get around that time, so I was expecting Spam to pick Cormag because I think having a flyer saves so much time. But Spam went with a Wyvern Rider, but not the one I expected. He picked Heath, which I was a little surprised by. But it pretty much meant I had to go with Cormag myself. I mean, I'm comfortable with all carries, I would say, but I'm definitely the most comfortable with Cormag, so I rolled with him. Erica route Cormag still very good. Still able to skip a lot of chapters. I particularly think that the desert chapter is a lot easier with a flyer. The Selena chapter is a lot easier with a flyer. The ghost ship is slightly easier, but mostly the chapter after that, where you're fighting on the docks, getting to the Cyclops boss, that's where a flyer saves like 4 minutes over a paladin carry. So I'm just much more comfortable having a flyer there. Cormag is the one I practiced with the last, but also probably the least. So I wasn't super comfortable with this, but it was fine. Now Pyrope, he wants to pick an FE7 and an FE8 carry, of course. The FE, you could pick from either game at this point, because they were both still somewhat open. You have to pick an FE8 Paladin, and then you have to pick either Franz or Seth, and then you have to pick kind of almost whatever you want for FE7. So for FE8, he went with Seth, and then for FE7, he went with Hawkeye, and both of these are very safe pick. You know, they're both pre-promotes, you don't really have a training arc to go on or anything like that. Both solid. Berserkers in FE7, particularly Hawkeye, are just very solid, because the chapters where you are liable to lose the most time by not playing suboptimally, but like having a suboptimal carry, are chapters with a lot of reinforcements, with reinforcement zones that you can skip by, you know, being on terrain. And you know, if you don't want to use Florina, then pretty much the only option to skip terrain at this point is while using a Berserker. You could use Fiora, I guess, but the problem with Fiora is that you cannot carry Hector if they're both promoted. So in a chapter like Victory or Death, which is a chapter where you can lose a lot of time if you're using someone like, I don't know, Kent or Sane or Lowen, then you stand to lose a lot of time compared to the Berserkers. Whereas there's a route for Hawkeye to just walk through the middle of the map and carry Hector along with him on his abs and just destroy everything. Okay, then it was my turn. Now, there were two options for me that I really wanted to, like, that were pretty even for me. One of them was Dart, and the other one was Florina. Now, Florina, most people are not super happy to get in a draft race, because she is really high potential, as in, like, you can get really low times with her, and she's really, really good, and being a flyer, of course, is great. But she's also very fragile. She has a bit of a training arc, so you fall behind early on, and you hope to make it up later on, which always just feels bad. It's a mentality thing. And of course, she's very fragile, so if you make one mistake, leave a range of a bow somewhere, or just put the wrong item on her, you can stand to lose a lot of time. It really can suck. So Florina, most people probably weren't comfortable with her. I was okay with it, but I haven't practiced with her a long time, so I was doubting a little bit. Dart I used last race. I was okay with him. I got second place. I felt like I could have gotten better. He's a bit inconsistent because of his hit rates, but at the same time, his potential time is still very good. He has a lot of the same advantages that Hawkeye does in like river walking and mountain walking in the chapters where it matters the most. And he can one-run a lot of endgame bosses, which is very cool. So I was okay with Dart, but I figured, like, I can't pass up a double flyer, right? That's kind of the feeling I went in with. So I just picked Florina in the end, and Dart ended up elsewhere. I think in hindsight, I should have just taken Dart, because I was probably more comfortable with Dart, and I thought the rest would be more uncomfortable with Florina. But I was like, you know what? I have the notes for Florina. I know exactly what moves to make in every single chapter, so I'm going to be fine with her. Especially if I can get Isadora, like, I'll just get such a good FE7 time. That's what I thought at the time. That's what I thought. So, what happens next is Spam is up, and he still doesn't need FE8 pick, so he takes Franz. Let me find him real quick. Franz is here. Franz is good. Like, he might seem inferior to Seth, but remember that Franz is allowed to be used between chapters 5 and 7, so those 3 chapters, where Seth is not. He is banned for every player. He's free for prologue 1, 2, 3, 4, for everyone can use him there, and he's banned for everyone in 5, 6, 7. And then he is allowed again if you drafted him for 8 onwards. This is so that Seth is by far the best unit. I'm not sure if you could actually beat the Flyers if he was allowed in those chapters, but that is the rule set that we decided on. So that's why Seth is such a weird late pick, even though he seems very powerful. He's still very good. But the Franz advantage is you can stomp through chapters 5 through 7 with him, train him there, and then after chapter 8, or like after chapter 7, you get the Nightcrest, you can promote him, and he's just very good. He's good enough to, for example, in chapter 10 Ephraim routes, he's the only carry besides Vanessa who will go for a kill boss objective by just getting to him fast enough. I suppose Seth could do it. It just feels a lot slower to do. But for most units, if you can't get to the boss fast enough, it's faster to just sit there with Ephraim and just end turn 10 times to win the chapter. But Franz is so fast, he can sometimes just kill that Bow Knight in time to make it worth going there. It's strange, I know, but it works out. So, spam pick Franz, then it's Castle's turn. Castle is completely unfamiliar with Dart as a carry. He watched like one video beforehand, but pretty much have to pick him. Like, you don't want to go with like freaking low one or anything. Or, you know, what else is there even for FE7? You really want Dart in this position even if you never used him. But he didn't have like notes or any like strategies for it or anything. He just had to go with the flow. And so he picked Dart and he's like, ah, let's make it work. And then the best secondaries, because from here we have carries and now we go into secondaries most of the time. Those are units that will like help you in chapters where just having one really good unit isn't enough. So think of a chapter again like FE7's Crazed Beast, where you have a lot of reinforcement zones and you can only seize one fort at a time with a unit like Hawkeye or Dart. Like they can walk somewhere, but if they have to walk from one fort to another, they have to fight so many extra enemies. You want to avoid the reinforcement zones and you want to seize all forts at the same time, preferably. So you want to have units that facilitate that. And there's some other like miscellaneous tasks that they can do, but for the most part you want to rely on one unit and only use other units when you have to. So in FE7 that is units like Isadora, Wrath, Fiora, and then in FE8 you have what I usually call like axe infantry units, units that will help in like routes to like clear another portion of the map. Like in chapter 15, the desert map, it's nice to send someone up to Kalak or help to clear the bottom area where all Falter's troops are. Because one unit routing the map is probably more inefficient in a chapter like that, especially if you have to beat it in a short amount of time to beat reinforcements to the punch. So basically secondaries at this point. Castle ended up taking Fiora. Fiora is a bit tricky to keep alive. We used to think she was like unrecruitable without losing time. Where is Fiora? There she is. A bit of a time loss, but nowadays we figured out strategies to make Fiora go for like one specific enemy as an NPC, and then you can talk to her with Florina, and you'll probably have to let Florina die, but you get Fiora out of it, you can train her up. And the funny thing with Fiora, what you can do is during Victory or Death, I said you cannot pick up Hector. That is if both are promoted, but if you leave her unpromoted, pick up Hector and then promote her, you have an 8-move flyer for one chapter that can pick up Hector. And then you just fly Fiora to the end point, and you die, she dies near the final area and drops Hector in place there, and then Hector is ready to seize, basically. You just need to kill them Stella with Dart. That is her final purpose, but on the way there, she can help seize forts in Crazed Beast and help in the desert chapter to like ferry stuff around. There's just a couple of things that Fiora's pretty good at, and no other unit really comes close besides Isadora. Speaking of which, I'm pretty sure this is when Spam picked Isadora. Let me just double check that. It is. Isadora is a great secondary because she requires 0.0 investment to do what you need to do. And an example of like Crazed Beast utility that Isadora can do is, you know, the upper left fort with Pascal, the paladin boss that moves. One of the greatest ways to seize that fort without having to fight through all the reinforcements is to have an 8-move unit like Isadora pick up Hector, stand at the edge of the reinforcement range, and then either on turn 2 or with an Indian Dance, you run in and you drop Hector on the fort. And then Pascal will come out, kill Isadora, or whatever paladin is there, or like Wrath or something. And then Hector can seize the fort, drop all his axes, and just stand on that fort while waiting for the other units to seize the other forts. That is something that you can just do for free with Isadora. But you can also keep her alive and use her for other tasks on the way there if you have an extra unit to do that Hector task with. If you have a flyer, there's no need for that tactic, but it is something that they can do. But yeah, Isadora's pretty good and just speeds up the joining chapter that she is in, helps in Battle Before Dawn to catch enemies before they can get to ZFVL. There's some things that Isadora cannot do that involve, like, for example, rescuing Hector is not something she can do after Hector promotes. but most of the time Isadora is the best paladin to use. The other ones take time to train. Then it's my turn, and I really hated the fact that Spam picked Isadora here because I wanted her myself. My notes just assumed I would get Isadora, and in an FE7 draft you probably would, just because usually Florina is like the 4th pick carry, but in an FE7 plus FE8 draft, things go a little bit differently, and I ended up concluding that I still wanted an 8 move unit to mostly just do the bottom left fort of Crazed Beast. I just wanted to have an 8 move unit with swords there. And unfortunately, I didn't really have the way to train Saint or Kent because the XP in the chapters where they're around needs to go to Florina. So my best option for that is Wrath. And Wrath, I didn't really have any experience training him in the Florina team, so I ended up bungaiing that a little bit. It ended up working out, but it wasn't great. But we'll go into detail when we actually get to the race. I think this was still the correct pick, but boy, I really should have practiced more with Wrath, I guess. It was not good. That's Pyrope's turn, and Pyrope at this point made interesting decisions. I don't know if I agree with their picks, but they worked out for him. So he picked Sully for FE8, and then he picked Lowen for FE7. Now, why are these interesting? Sully is... I didn't expect him to go this soon because I was kind of assuming people would go Ephraim route more often, and he's not super high in demand there. He's still helpful, but Pyrope and Castle were planning to go Erica route, and so they valued Sully a lot higher, which is understandable because he has a lot more chapters of availability. So he picked Sully for that reason. And then Lowen, normally if you want a Cavalier for FE7, I usually look to the Christmas Cavaliers because they can train themselves. They need less level ups to get to level 10 and promote and do that task that I just mentioned about Crazed Beast. So if you just want an 8 move unit, an 8 move secondary, then Kent and Saint are easier to train on Lowen. Lowen joins a lot earlier but at a lower level, so you have to spend more time training him up. The other reason to pick Lowen over those is that Lowen can help you in chapter 13, the chapter with Guy, where Lowen can pick up Marcus on turn 1 or 2, whatever you want, while Hector tries to cross the river from the starting point down to where the boss is. And then when Hector is about to go out of reach, Lowen will give Marcus to Hector, and Hector will drop Marcus across the river, and that saves you a bunch of time. Not that much, like maybe, I don't know, couple minutes, but it's still nice. That's the one thing I think that you can pick Lowen for. Other than that, I feel like Saint and Kentis have better stats suited for draft races, like just killing things and level ups. But hey, Pyro picked Lowen. That's what he went with. That's what he did. And he did end up promoting him and using him a fair bit. So again, I could say it worked out. I don't know if that's like... It still probably cost him time to do that, but hey, it was his preferences. And sometimes it's better to pick like what you're comfortable with and whatnot. Now it's my turn. I really kind of wanted to pick Dusel at this point because he's the best axe infantry unit. Generally, these units are like Ross, Garcia, Dosla, and Dusel and Garrick. All these can do roughly the same thing with, you know, some key differences. Ross and Garcia are around early on. Ross needs training. Garcia needs less training. Garrick can just instant promote and be good, but lacks the strength that Dusel has. Dusel is by far the best one because he joins around the time when you start needing one for the mid game. But I thought I might be able to skimp on Dusel because Castle is going Erica route, but Spam is still in between, so he might still pick him. At the same time, though, the problem was with picking Dusel is I also really need Lynn for Florina because Florina's early training arc is very intensive, and if she gets stat screwed on like speed or strength and she doesn't kill the things that I'm counting her to kill, I just have to go off script and improvise, which will take a lot of extra time with Florina. And I just want her to feed as many levels as possible as early as possible. I really want to just have Lynn supporting Florina starting chapter 17 and be able to know, okay, even if I get screwed, I still have +2 strength from base to one-round things with. So I ended up picking Lynn over Dusel because the axe infantry for FE8, even if I don't get Dusel, I'll probably be able to get like Garrick or Garcia or Ross, and it'll be okay. But there's no replacement for Lynn's early training arc, and right now I'm really relying on Florina in FE7. I don't need more combat units, I just need more good units to help Florina work. So Spam predictably somewhat picked Dusel, took him from me, took him away. During the race there was actually several points where Spam kind of forgot that he had Dusel. It's only like 2 chapters, but it was very funny when it happened. But yeah, Dusel's very good. You might think he helps a lot on Phantom Ship, but in Phantom Ship you can usually just get by with Franz alone. Like Dusel probably saves like a minute by being there and killing some more enemies. But most of the enemies just come to you and suicide on you. As long as Franz is durable enough, he will do it. Like, he might have to run back and forth. Remember, you also have F-frame in FE8, so you don't have to, like, you're not short on combat units there, no matter what you do. Franz and F-frame alone can do like 90% of the work there, but it's still very nice to have. And I think this is a fine pick, especially because in FE7 he already has Heath and Isadora, so there was not much value for him to pick an FE7 unit here. So good pick by Spam for sure. And we get to Castle. He went with, very interestingly, I agree with his pick for Garrick here, because he also needs an Axe Infantry, and he doesn't have any yet, so Vanessa having Garrick is good. Garrick's not as good as Dazla, but still able to do most of the work, and because he's going Erica route, he'll get him a little bit earlier than the Ephraim route people would. And I mean, he's just the second best out of all these if you don't need him for early game, which he doesn't because he has Vanessa, as well as Erica to work with, so it's pretty fine. But then he picked, very strangely, he picked Dazla. I think he did this to deny me Dazla because Castle thought I would value him higher. I think I would maybe end up on Dazla, but I had no experience using him, so I'm not sure what Dazla could do for me. But I was like, I'm not super bothered by this as a denial pick because Ross and Garcia are still there, and they're a bit slower for sure. Like, you have to train him a little bit. Garcia in particular has a problem where he needs a hero crest to promote, and if you're going Ephraim routes, then the hero crest from chapter 10 is hard to get. It's in a village that is usually occupied by the Green Cavaliers that do solo companies, and it's pretty time consuming to just get in the first place. My chapter 10 clear was almost always going to be just sit there with Ephraim, wait for Cormac to fly up to me, recruit him with Tana, and then just train Cormac on the reinforcements there. So getting to that hero crest was not going to happen. So Garcia was not a great pick for me anyway. And when he picked Dawes, I was pretty sure, yeah, I'm going to have to pick Ross at some point here. Which will also just give me something to do in the early game besides using Erica, because using Erica alone in the early game can be a little bit rough if your Erica gets screwed. So yeah, that's my consideration for this round. Before that though, Spam still has a pick. He's going to go with Kent, which I thought was interesting but understandable. Hold up. There we go. Kent, come here. Kent was a little strange, but I get it. He only has Heath in the early game because Isadora joins pretty late, and there's a couple spots where Hector's accuracy can be an issue, particularly against like sword users. So what I thought this pick before, I didn't see Spam's FE7 run very in depth, but what I'd like to do with Kent is use him to fight some of the sword units early on in chapter 17, the Whereabouts Unknown, the one where Raven, well, I would say joins, but he fights you, that chapter. There's a couple of other spots where just having a Cavalier flunky is just nice. Not necessary, but just nice to have. So I thought this was a safe pick. Not sure what else you could have picked. Most of the things that you can pick at this point, like the longer you go, the less these picks matter because the better units have already been picked. The first 3 rounds are really the most important ones by a big margin. I don't think there was a whole lot for him to do. His FE8 and FE7 teams are basically complete as far as necessity goes. So this is a good flunky pick. There's only 3 total Cavaliers at this point, and one of them was already picked in Lowen, so I don't mind this pick. This is alright. But yeah, and then I pick Ross for what I pretty much already explained. You do want someone that can use a hand axe to kill some things every now and then, and I considered Garcia, but since he couldn't promote, I had no practice with him really, like 1 run. I decided to go with Ross, particularly in chapter 5. It's nice to have a pirate Ross to clear the way. And you'll see how that works out in a draft race. But I was pretty satisfied with him, even though it takes quite a while to train Ross. And I could have sent the XP that I gave to Ross to Erica instead, and that probably would have given roughly the same result on average. But if Erica gets screwed, it's nice to have Ross as a backup and vice versa. So this way I kind of hedge my bets, as it were. At this point, Pyro goes completely off script. He picks Inez. Again, going Erica route, it makes some sense since Inez joined a bit earlier. It's also a nice helpful unit to have in the desert chapter, so it's alright. Inez, and then for FE7 he picks Vida. Vida is one of those units that I know in theory can be helpful for FE7. My planning just assumes I don't have Vida, and I just play accordingly, so half the time I draft Vida, I just forget she exists. But she's pretty good. She just only has a couple chapters where she can have an impact. But in a chapter like Sands of Time or Victory or Death, if you don't know exactly how you're going about it, having an extra unit with really high strength and the option to use like a Brave Lance or a Spear or a Silver Lance, this is good. So I can't fault this pick. And again, there are units that gives helpful stuff, like you can pick someone like Sarah or Urk, which will allow Sarah to recruit Urk, which will give you a Goddess icon. But it's very minor overall and not nearly as necessary. There's some other units that like could be picked here. A really funny one that could have been picked here is Pent, but he didn't come up until later. What else is there? I'm not gonna go over the whole draft in depth like this because honestly the impact these units have starts to run low. I picked Urk here for that aforementioned goddess icon and like flunkiness. Florina does need someone that Marcus can rescue in chapter 16, the Noble Lady of Kaelin chapter, Florina's joining chapter. She does need someone there because Marcus needs to pick them up holding an iron sword to weaken enemies for Florina to kill on the first couple of turns. And Urk is one of the units that can do that. There are a couple more units, but Urk is one of the safer ones to use for that. So I picked him, and also because he grants me a goddess icon. So that's Urk. Spam was surprised to find Tana still available. I expected Tana to be picked a bit earlier because I thought some of the players valued training Tana as a viable option. I think that if you're just going for the fastest possible times, Tana is not very good because especially if you're going Ephraim routes, it just takes so much training to get going. Like either you have to go to the Tower of Volney or slow down one of the other chapters to get her up and running. And at that point, like Spam, for example, would have a perfectly trained Franz. And if you're going Erica routes, I guess you could train Tana in chapter 9, but it's still not optimal, again, when you have a powerful Franz or Vanessa or Seth or something like that. So I didn't think that was great. But what I overlooked is that Vanessa or Tana in chapter 10, Ephraim routes, again, the chapter where Duzel joins and you fight Baran and Selena leaves as a boss, and you recruit Cormag. Tana can rescue Franz, I think on turn 1 or 2, and then drop him over the water, and at that point, you can drop him, and he's further ahead than he would be, so you save some time there. You don't have to walk all the way around. Sneaky, good maneuver. I like it. It's a good choice, good pick for sure. Definitely one of the better time savers. Someone else could have picked it as a denial. I don't know if it would have given any value. Castle at this point picks both thieves, Matthew and Colm. Let me find them. There we go. Good picks, definitely. Colm is great for Vanessa. I guess I could have picked him as a denial pick for sure for Castle. The most important steal, probably the only steal he does, is taking the energy ring in chapter 7, and then he likely dies. The energy ring on Vanessa just gives her so much safety, and combined with the Erica route Ephraim energy rings that Castle definitely all used on this Vanessa. Vanessa can just basically not get strength screwed. It just can't happen. She will always hit the benchmark she needs to for strength. That's great. Matthew in FE7 is mostly for the speed wings from Zoldam and the pirate ship chapter. The one with the Luna boss. He's not as necessary for his team. Dart usually doesn't need a speed wing, and Fiora definitely doesn't need one. If you could transfer that speed wing to FE8 for Dazla, I guess he would go with that. Or even Garrett can use the speed wing sometimes. As is, I think it was just a denial pick, and it's a good denial pick. I didn't think I really needed... Florina team can't really use the speed wing steal with Matthew because you don't fight Zoldam. You spend a lot of time training Florina in 18, and if you just get crit by Zoldam afterwards, you just have to do it all over again. Other teams can get crit by Zoldam too, but they kill him on like turn 3 or 4 with Hector, but just walking straight there, so they don't lose as much from a Zoldam crit as other units do. So Matthew would have been a great pick for Spam here, for example, and also for Pyro. Like Speedwing on Hawkeye or Heath is just really good. So I'm glad that Castle did that denial here. I think I really benefited from that. What else happens here? I think this is when you get into really some unserious picks here. Spam picks Priscilla because of the way the rules are written. This allows you to deploy Sarah to recruit Urk so that you automatically recruit Priscilla, and that allows you to get the goddess icon, and then you also have like the option to use Priscilla in later chapters if you want to. It doesn't really come up, I don't think, but it's something you can do. I picked Oswin here, mostly due to the river carry strategy that I explained with Lowen for chapter 13, the Gi chapter. Oswin is probably one of the worst ones for that because he only has 4 moves, so you have to be a bit more specific where you move him. But he's also a good emergency character to have. I think Castle thought I was going to use Oswin to train Florina. I didn't really have plans for that. I just thought it was a good backup strategy. It's also nice to have extra characters for chapter 17, Whereabouts Unknown, to put at the bottom of the map, I guess. Didn't really end up doing that a whole lot. I just used Urk instead. You only need 1 flunky for that part. But Oswin is okay. But yeah, I didn't really have anything else that I really wanted to get, so I'm going to speed round through most of the other picks, I think. This point, Pyro picked Wallace and Pent. Pens might be surprised that he didn't go earlier. He is a nice free utility unit that you can just use in late game. He doesn't do a whole lot when you have the whole game planned out and you just assume you don't have Pens, but it's a nice safety precaution. He can physic someone if they get hurt unexpectedly, or he can just help routing maps and stuff like that. So he's nice, but he's not as necessary. If you planned out the whole thing, you could probably find places where a warp or a rescue can save time though. Wallace, you don't recruit him actually, but what Wallace allows you to do is, again, you're allowed to deploy an undrafted unit if they recruit one of your drafted units. So this allows you to deploy Florina in the chapter where you recruit Wallace, and you can use Florina to shop things. So that's why Wallace has been picked here. I'm not sure how useful it was, but it's an alright pick. It works. At this point, I was like, well, it's still free, so I might as well take Sane as a cat flunky. I probably could have made better use of him too at this point. I was kind of surprised he was still there, considering how early-ish Kent and Lowen went. I didn't really do a whole lot with him, but it was nice that he was there, I guess. It was alright. And Sane, and then Spam still needed someone to do that river carry thing with. The only ones left that can do that is Dorcas and Bartray, so Spam picked Dorcas. And then what else we got? And then we got Sarah and Louise for Castle, Goddess Icon, and like a unit that can use a bow a couple times, and FE7 is alright. Doesn't really do a whole lot, but it's there. And then we just mostly just picked joke units, so like Joshua was picked here. And this is the last one I think I want to elaborate on. I picked Amelia here as a bit of a joke slash, it was like a half joke. Again, this allowed me to deploy Franz in Chapter 9 because Franz recruits Amelia. And the thought process was, one of the most annoying things about Chapter 9 in Ephraim routes is the Gep chapter. There's a couple of sleep staff priests. And Amelia and Franz would allow me to bait sleep into them by putting them at the bottom of my deployment order. And that way they would stay away from Ephraim. And, well, pretty much just Ephraim. I think that was my only unit. Oh, Ross too. So it was like a safety pick that I actually ended up using. So out of like the last 4 units, I wouldn't say she did the most, but she did like roughly as much as they did, which I think is pretty amusing. And at this point, Pyro picked Garcia and Mulder, which were alright picks. I don't know how much they did for him, but they sure did exist. And from here it was mostly joke picks. It was already mostly joke picks, so I'll just leave. This is the full draft. I think it fits on the screen. Well, not quite. But most of these units didn't really do a whole lot, but they sure existed. I don't think there's a whole lot to elaborate on here, so I'll continue with the actual race analysis. Before we get into the race itself, I should mention that I'm mostly going to be recapping my own experience because I was focused on that during the race, so it's possible I missed some highlights from the others. I did of course hear them talk throughout and I was able to watch them during breaks, but this video unfortunately cannot be a full breakdown of all 4 perspectives. Alright, so the start of these is usually a little dull because you're just playing Chapter 11 with only Matthew and Hector, and everyone knows what to do with those two to finish as fast as possible. Except when I leveled up my Hector, I noticed that he was getting a suspicious level up. And then I realized, yeah, I'm playing on an average growth patch by accident, and not wanting to restart the whole race, I just, loaded the right ROM and I was already behind. Florina team is meant to fall behind, but not before you actually recruit her and start training her. Speaking of that, Chapter 16 is when Florina joins, and I screw up the arc right away on turn 1 by not trading Florina's Vulnerary to Hector like you're meant to do. You're meant to swap the Vulnerary and the Iron Lance. This stops the Thief from stealing from you, instead makes him attack Florina on turn 1 enemy phase. And that didn't happen, and so the whole plan went to shit. But I didn't want to reset the chapter for some reason because I only realized it a bit too late. I just went with it. But there's a ton of errors like this that you can make with Florina that can impact your clears to the point where you might have to reset a long chapter or do like a quick reset. I had to do a lot of quick resets like this. From there, the training arc went actually kind of well. Florina grew a fair bit of strength, not a whole lot of speed, but she was good enough to where I felt like I was still in it, even though I was falling behind horribly because, all these aforementioned factors. The biggest annoyance I had was definitely Chapter 19. Uhai is that Nomad Trooper boss that's in that Fog of War map. He's all the way in the bottom right. And Florina is actually the best carry to beat Uhai with because she can carry Hector through all these mountains and forests to get to him in time. And then once you arrive, you put Florina at 3 range from Uhai, and you can have Hector attack him over and over without Hector getting attacked by the Killing Edge ever, because Uhai will just keep longbowing Florina, which she could just vulnerate off the damage. It's not that threatening. Unfortunately, The way you're meant to do this is like you weaken him with Wolf Beetle or Iron Axe and you kill with the Horse Slayer. But I got crit by the Horse Slayer. I got crit by the Killing Edge with Florina, and she died. And so I had to reset once. And then the next time I was checking to see if I could kill with the Horse Slayer, noticed that I couldn't, and then backed off. But in GBA, if you try to use the weapon and then decide not to use it, the game still equips that weapon for you on enemy phase. And so Uhai doubled and killed Lorna on enemy phase. Oops. So the third time it went fine. I killed him and we got to move on. Dragon's Gate went fine. Chapter 21, the Oleg chapter, New Resolve. It was going well, in fact a little bit too well. My Hector doubled Oleg, I think, and he just crit him instantly. And this would be good, you know, you save a turn, but that turn you're meant to go shopping for Pure Waters. Florina team probably needs Pure Waters the least because her resistance is good, unlike Heath and Dart. But I still wanted them for Hector, so I reset the chapter after some consideration. I almost went on too if Castle hadn't mentioned that he had Pure Waters. I was like, yeah, Pure Water is actually kind of good. Chapter 22, probably my biggest throw here. Like, Uhai was partially luck and part, I guess, misclick. This was just me making the wrong decisions. So I tried to do a strategy that requires Isadora. The idea is that you pick up Hector on turn 1 with Isadora, and then you move Florina as far forward as you can with Ninian and a door key, and she gets so far ahead in the map that you can just get a really quick clear, faster than like any other way possible. But I didn't get Isadora, I got Wrath, and Wrath is not around to do this rescue job. What I should have done is tried it with Sane, and if that didn't work, I didn't even check if it could work in hindsight. But if I didn't do it with Sane, who I did draft, then I should have just gone the normal route of like going south, which I tried on a new attempt. And that didn't go well on my first try because Florina just got hit by every single ballista and like enemy that attacked her. But I was like, well, the odds of this happening are kind of low. I could just reset and try again. It's probably still for the better than a slower approach. And it worked out the second time, but that sucked. I was so far behind at this point, but I had taken a break because the Oleg crit and Uhai and the Kinship's Bond were kind of throwing me off. So while I took my break, the others went way ahead of me, which it doesn't matter for the time if you're thinking about the race rationally, because even though everyone is ahead, you know that your break time will get added into the final time. It gets factored in a way that it doesn't penalize you for taking a break. You either take a break or you take a time penalty, basically. And no one else really took as much of break time as I did for some reason, and the break was really nice. I got to eat some dinner. We started drafting at like 4 my time, and I usually eat around 6. And at this point it was like 6 or 7 o'clock, so I was kind of getting hungry. So I took a break, and now from here on out in all the footage I'm going to be looking like I'm way behind because I took way more break. So 23, the desert chapter, because I didn't do a whole lot of Wrath training in the previous one, I had to train Wrath in the desert. And it doesn't really work out that well because I didn't really have a plan for it, and I was just like chipping this Armor Knight over and over for like 10 XP at a time. And I didn't have a Brave Bow or anything like that to help him a little bit. So that took some time. Florina's lack of speed meant that she couldn't fight as well as she did. It was mostly hurting her against the boss. I think it was Paul. So that kind of sucked, but it worked out in the end. But yeah, I trained Wrath. And now in chapter 24, I realized I made a huge error. Back in 21 New Resolve, usually you sell a couple of items to get a lot of money so you can buy weapons and Pure Waters, and the normal play is to sell the Orion's Bolt that Uhai drops. Unless you have Wrath, then you're not supposed to do that. Then you're supposed to like sell red gems or something else. Maybe sell your Ocean Seal later to get money for Reavers. But I sold my Orion's Bolt like a dumbass, so that meant that I couldn't promote Wrath, and I need to be promoted before 25, or rather in the preps of 25. So even though I leveled him to 10, I didn't have a way to promote him. But 24, there's an Earthseal village, and I was like, well, you know, it's not the intended strategy. You're supposed to just go up to Lloyd, put Florian on the fort, and then Lloyd will just attack you at 1 range, and you kill him in 2 hits with the Silver Lance. You can maybe get Ninian involved for some extra help. It's a really fast chapter for Florina, probably the best chapter for Florina, or rather, Florina is the best carry for that chapter. But, you know, I didn't have that option, so what I had to do instead is fly her to the Earthseal village, and it was a mess, and it didn't work out. Then I fought a bishop in the bottom right, and he dropped an Orion's Bolt. I was like, wait, there is an Orion's Bolt here. Unfortunately, I messed up so badly that I felt like I had to reset. So I went back and just fought the bishop for the Orion's Bolt. Unfortunately, in trying to figure out who was going to do what, like who's going to like get a monk out of the way, and like who's going to fight the bishop, and who's going to break the snag, and who's going to shop, I forgot to assign someone to actually shop before I killed Lloyd. So I forgot to visit the Reaver shop, and this is the only time you have to buy them for the time that you need them. So I only had Heath's Axe Reaver, and that's it, and you kind of need more than that. So from here on out, I'm going to be stuck without, for example, Sword Reavers for Hector, which is a really big deal. 25, Crazed Beasts. If you're going to like not throw a chapter, this is probably the best one, because this can cost you so much time if you don't. I think this is where I made up a lot of time, where other races had to reset, but you weren't.
Oh god, he fucking died.
What?
He's sitting on the throne, and he's literally gonna die.
Oh, that would be so huge for the rest of us.
He's got a Sword Reaver on.
I knew that I would.
So, needs to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.
He's dead. I'm taking a break.
No.
That's a good idea.
I sent them to distract you.
Alright, this time I'm going to go to the spot that won't get blocked.
Oh, I didn't remember that was
Don't
a...
reinforcements don't block me.
Oh, can any of these guys do 1 damage? I didn't remember that that was in range of that third ballista. Fiora has 1 health.
Alright, I'm here eating. I'm just going to watch Castle somehow get the top left fort. That seems really interesting.
Okay. Cool.
I'm so shocked that the monks didn't block my way that time. It looked like they were about to.
Fuck, Fiora died. Fuck.
Oh, rough.
Yeah, it's something I didn't plan for. It's the calves.
Hmm.
You could have Fiora go up later.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm gonna do.
Is Heath seriously gonna die right now? I forgot to pure water.
Let me do this right, because yeah, she just needs to be the last. Well, not really, because I have a plan there too. I don't know. Should I just not?
Please.
Spam, no!
Please. Please.
Oh!
Oh no!
What
Crazed
happened?
Beast is
Fucking
the
Crazed
killer.
Beast, bro.
I know at least 2 of them, and maybe even all 3, had like a long reset on this one. I had to do a quick reset, like turn 1 or turn 2, but they had to like go deep and then reset, which is much worse. I got a smooth 3-turn once I figured out that I didn't really need the short spear for this chapter, but my notes said get the short spear here. This is one of the big drawbacks of trying to go off of a set plan and trying to do fancy things. So 25, I beat it in like 3 turns, thanks to Wrath being able to move all the way through the forest. That's why he has to be promoted. Thanks to Florina being able to drop Hector off of the right-hand fort, and then being able to fly to the upper left. And they could just all seize at the same time. It was really smooth and really nice. 26 is like a very easy chapter. I'm not going to go into that. 27, Pale Flower of Darkness. I got slightly screwed here because I didn't have a Sword Reaver, so what happened at the end was there's an enemy Swordmaster blocking the way, and normally you equip Hector with the Sword Reaver, and Florina with the Silverlance, and then Florina beats the Swordmaster to death. But because my Hector had an axe equipped, the Swordmaster went for him instead, and he ended up blocking my way. But it only cost me like 1 or 2 extra turns, so it wasn't too bad. Where it was really bad is Battle Before Dawn. That was hellish. This is the fight where you have to protect Zephiel, and if Zephiel dies, it's a game over. You have to just reset the whole chapter. This is partially RNG. Even if you do everything right, there is a chance Jafar just dies in the first couple of turns, and there is nothing you can do about it. The enemies will make it to Zephiel before you do, but if he survives until turn 4 or so, you're golden. Now, all carries wants to make it to Ursula ASAP in the bottom right corner. Ursula being alive makes a lot of reinforcements spawn, which cost extra time to fight, and it introduces extra risk to Zephiel, and for that, the carries need Ninian's help. Heath can usually make it with 1 dance on turn 1, since he destroys everything at this point. Florina lacks the strength to do that, and Dart and Hawkeye lack the move. So what they do instead is get a dance on turn 1, then you rescue Ninian, and over the next couple turns you hand Ninian off to the carry as they drop her in place for a second dance, and then you can kill Ursula really quickly. And also this lets you catch a pair of mercenaries that would otherwise make it to Zephiel. So the problem that I ran into is that in order to do this Ninian rescue chain, I have to remove this one hero from the top of the map, and my Hector could not kill him quickly enough due to the lack of a Sword Reaver. So my selling of the Orion's Bolt resulted in my not buying Reavers, which resulted into me getting stuck on Battle Before Dawn until eventually I managed to pull through. But what I really should have done is deploy a couple flunkies, again like Sane, to perhaps suicide into the hero to get him out of the way. Now, because of my many errors, it felt like I was really far behind everyone, but Florina always falls behind other carries during her training arc, and I take more of my break time than others, so while I was the last one to start FE8 in real time, I had less time on the clock, and I think I could realistically catch up. So going into FE8, I was cautiously optimistic. Now, me and Spam were going Ephraim route, which is potentially faster, but it's also more punishing if you screw up, while Castle and Pyrope were going Erica route, which has some longer maps, but you don't lose much time if something goes wrong. But I'm the only one going Ephraim route with a flyer carry, Cormag, while Castle and Vanessa are going Erica route. And the player I thought had the best shot at FE8 was Spam, the guy who won the previous FE8 race, but his carry was Franz, who is generally considered to be a little slower. Though, I think if everyone played perfectly, they would still be within like 5 to 10 minutes of each other, so nothing was set in stone. But Cormac only joins in Chapter 10, and I was going to have to train Ross in the early game along with Erica. Ross isn't, like, difficult to train, but it takes some real time to set up kills for him and watch all his experience and level ups. And to an extent, Vanessa and Franz have to deal with this too, but less so. And they start zooming through maps around Chapter 5 or 6. Now, my Ross ended up growing a lot of strength and defense, and at first, but not a lot of speed, so he was just kind of armor knighting through maps with Erica. Honestly, FE8 went really smoothly for me, but for most people, it's a much easier game to not get punished by compared to FE7. But there was still a lot of room for things to go wrong. Spam, in particular, was just storming through maps hard with Franz. But the turning point of the race was Chapter 15, the desert map with Kalak and Falter. This is a massive route map with enemies spread all over, and players who efficiently clear all these enemies before turn 8, they get off easy. But if you fail to meet that deadline, you are punished by several sets of reinforcements, including a large group from the bottom left. And Spam got it really bad this chapter. His Franz got crit and presumably pierced by Falter after a long attempt. And then on his retry, his Dusel had a lot of trouble hitting Kalak, and he ended up dying there due to a mistake. Now, at this point in time, everyone had flown ahead of Spam, though due to our various break times, it's closer than it looks in the footage. Castle was nearing the end of Chapter 20, so the game was nearly over for him, but he had hardly taken any break time. I was taking a break after beating the desert chapter myself, Chapter 15, and I had 25 minutes to catch up to Castle. So I was roughly tied with Pyrope, who was finishing up Chapter 18 with his timer about 12 minutes ahead of mine. And at this point, I think I was favored to win a close race. If I played the last couple of chapters well, I think I could catch up to him within the time between us. And I had several advantages that I could cash in on. I had a trained Ephraim as my lord, while Pyrope has Erica, and Ephraim is better at boss killing since he hits harder and has a better time surviving enemies, so basically I was better at killing bosses and seizing chapters. I also had a flyer carry with Cormag, while Pyrope had a grounded paladin in Seth, and several late game maps feature heavy terrain. And as I mentioned earlier, Pyrope was mostly improvising his way through, while I was following the Don scripture. And now improvising the right moves is definitely faster than constantly checking your notes to make sure you're doing the right thing, but if it causes you to make suboptimal moves or even bad moves, then it can lead to some big problems. As Pyrope is working his way through Chapter 20, Castle's Myrrh crits the final chapter's Leon.
Let's go, Myrrh. He is indeed. Come on, Myrrh, crit this. You got a 10% chance. Oh, did that crit? Ah!
Oh, you got the Myrrh crit, nice.
Ah!
Based.
One shot. Damn.
All right,
Even though I'm going to lose the race, I still technically finished first. That's a win!
And right after crits the Demon King, giving him a final time of 5:47 for both games. Given the gap between his time and the times of me and Pyrope, we both have to throw really hard to not beat him. But it is worth noting that Castle made up some serious time compared to FE7. He did a really good job considering he played the slower Erica route, and he played with an FE7 carry that he had never used before. Meanwhile, Pyrope struggles to figure out exactly how to get Erica, Myrrh, and Cyrene safely to Morva, and he doesn't quite know where the reinforcement zone is. And Spam, in the meanwhile, unfortunately, eats another reset in the desert due to Erica being in range of one too many Pegasus Knights. Pyrope finds a spot to place Myrrh and Cyrene that lets him go in, but discovers that Myrrh at her current HP is incapable of surviving Morva, since his 36 damage breath attack ignores defense. He settles for brutally murdering Reeve instead, and a turn later heals Myrrh and parks her in front of Morva. Cyrene takes on all the enemies for Erica and eventually gives her life, giving him a straight path to the gate that can be cleared by Myrrh. Unfortunately, this leaves him very low on Dragonstone uses. He only has 9 remaining going into the final chapter. Myrrh only needs maybe half of that to just kill Leon, but there are a lot of enemies near Leon that could run that down faster. Seth can come in to help, but he forgot to bring Fafnir and instead carried the Brave Lance and a couple of spears. Hilariously, he crits one of the dragon zombies to death, removing a big threat from play, as Spam avoids another desert reset because of the Pegasi not going for his low HP Erica. Pyrope enters the Lion area. Seth only does 9 damage against Lion but quadruples, so it will take 3 rounds of combat with 9 total attacks to win. Leon also brings Seth to single-digit HP, so Pyrope cannot attack on player phase. Now both Seth's HP and Brave Lance's uses are quite limited, but he bravely swallows up Pure Water and goes in. The faith pays off as Seth gets a lucky 7% critical, hastening the process. And then Seth dodges the deadly stone from a Gorgon, which would otherwise have caused a reset. Seth cannot attack again, but he can heal himself with an elixir, and from here Pyrope is home free to defeat the Demon King with Myrrh, Ephraim, and of course Seth. He gets a final time of 5 hours, 40 minutes, 7 minutes ahead of Castle, giving me 13 minutes to catch up to him. As Spam finally escapes the desert hell, I finish up Last Hope and enter chapter 20. Cormag, Myrrh, and Ephraim fly left and land in front of Morva with about 8 minutes to go. Morva puts Ephraim down to scarily low health. Ephraim has an angelic robe and a pure water for the situation, but it would be very tragic if he died. An unarmed Cormag distracts most enemies, but Ephraim can still get attacked by a Cyclops or Riev. Fortunately, the Cyclops misses, and we'll never know if he would have lived, although he usually does from my experience. Final chapter. I make the final T-pose formation with my units and fly up north with Myrrh and Cormag. 6 minutes remaining, but it's enough. I'm feeling confident. My Myrrh grows a lot of res, so I don't think she will die to Leon, which is just about the only thing that can go wrong. Cormag clears the way for Myrrh, and I check the forecast on Leon. Myrrh only takes 10 damage. I am free to attack, and eventually I get the kill. Against the Demon King, I try Myrrh, I get no crits, then Cormag comes in, and he gets an unexpected pierce, instantly bringing the Demon King down to 0, giving me a final time of 5 hours and 38 minutes, only 2 minutes ahead of Pyrope. If I can be honest for a moment, I did not expect this race to be this close. Everyone involved thought of me as the favorite, and it felt a little bit like this might have been too easy to be fun. Fortunately, my ability to throw hard with Florina came through, and we got an extremely competitive race where everyone was in the running for first or second place at some point. This was so much fun. Thanks to Castle, Pyrope, and Spam for playing. Well played. That's going to do it for this recap today. I do plan to do some videos on the units and strategies employed in draft racing with a little bit more depth, because I saw a lot of people asking good questions about the weird looking picks, but that is still in the works. For now, I hope you enjoyed, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.